I was standing at the edge of the ballroom in my rented tuxedo when I accidentally spilled an entire glass of red wine down the front of a woman's white designer gown. That moment, that single clumsy second at the annual Hartwell Foundation Charity Gala, would completely change the direction of my entire life. But let me start from the beginning so you can understand how a 34-year-old janitor from the south side of Chicago ended up at one of the most exclusive events in the city, and why what happened next still feels like something out of a movie I never thought I would be in. My name is Marcus Thompson. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that always smelled like cooking grease and mildew. My mother worked double shifts at a hospital laundry service, and my father left when I was 7, promising to come back with enough money to move us somewhere better. He never came back. I learned early that promises from people who were supposed to love you meant nothing unless they were backed by action. My mother was different, though. She never made promises she could not keep. Instead, she just worked. She worked until her hands were cracked and bleeding from the industrial chemicals. She worked until her back was so bad she could barely stand up straight. She worked until she died of a heart attack at 53, alone in the break room of that hospital, still wearing her uniform. I was 26 when she passed. I had just started working as a janitor at the Hartwell building downtown, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that housed some of the most powerful business people in the entire Midwest. Every night, I would push my cart through those pristine hallways, emptying trash cans and mopping floors while men and women in suits worth more than my annual salary walked past me without a second glance. I was invisible to them, and honestly, I preferred it that way. Invisibility meant safety. It meant no one asking questions about my past, about the 2 years I spent in prison for a crime I did not commit, about the wrongful conviction that nearly destroyed my faith in everything. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the night of the gala, because that is where everything really began. The Hartwell Foundation Charity Gala was the social event of the year. Every January, the wealthy elite of Chicago gathered in the grand ballroom of the Hartwell Hotel, which was connected to the building where I worked, to raise money for various causes. This year, the theme was education for underprivileged youth, which I found deeply ironic given how most of these people had never set foot in the neighborhoods where those underprivileged youth actually lived. They would write their checks, pose for their photos, feel good about themselves, and then go back to their gated communities without ever knowing the names of the children they claimed to be helping. I was not supposed to be at the gala. My job was to clean the service corridors and back hallways while the event was happening, making sure everything stayed pristine for the guests who might wander away from the main ballroom. But my supervisor, a man named Gerald, who had been at the company for over 20 years, came to me that afternoon with an unusual request. "Marcus," he said, looking uncomfortable, "we have a problem. 3 of the service staff called in sick, and we need someone to help with the coat check and general assistance during the gala. You are the most presentable of the night crew. Would you be willing to fill in?" I stared at him, not sure I had heard correctly. "You want me to work the gala in front of all those people?" Gerald nodded. "We will get you a proper uniform. You will mostly be in the background, helping guests, that sort of thing. There is overtime pay, of course." I thought about my rent, which was due in 3 days. I thought about the transmission on my car that had been making worrying sounds for weeks. I thought about the fact that I had not bought new shoes in 2 years. "Okay," I said, "I will do it." That is how I found myself standing in the corner of the Hartwell Hotel ballroom at 7:30 that evening, wearing a rented tuxedo that was slightly too tight across the shoulders and trying not to make eye contact with anyone. The room was magnificent, I have to admit that. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with scenes of angels and clouds. The floor was polished marble that reflected the light like water. Round tables draped in white linen filled the space, each one decorated with elaborate floral centerpieces that probably cost more than my weekly salary. The guests began arriving in waves, the women in gowns that sparkled under the chandeliers, the men in tuxedos that actually fit them properly. I watched them air kiss and shake hands, their laughter ringing out across the ballroom like wind chimes in a storm. They talked about stock portfolios and vacation homes and the difficulty of finding good help these days, and I stood in my corner feeling like an imposter who had somehow snuck into a world where he absolutely did not belong. My job that night was simple. Circulate with a tray of champagne glasses, offer them to guests, Return to the kitchen when the tray was empty. Repeat. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make waves. Be invisible, just like always. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, offering drinks with a murmured, "Would you like some champagne?" and receiving either a nod or a dismissive wave in return. No one looked at my face. No one asked my name. I was simply a function, a pair of hands holding a tray, as unremarkable as the wallpaper. And then I saw her. She was standing near the edge of the dance floor, alone despite the crowd swirling around her. Her gown was white, so white it seemed to glow under the chandeliers, with delicate beading that caught the light when she moved. Her dark hair was swept up in an elegant twist, and she wore a simple diamond necklace that drew my eyes to the graceful curve of her neck. But it was not her beauty that made me stop, though she was certainly beautiful. It was the expression on her face. She looked lost. Not physically lost, but emotionally lost, like someone who had found themselves in a place they did not recognize anymore, like someone who was drowning in plain sight while everyone around her was too busy admiring the scenery to notice. I should have kept walking. That is what the old Marcus would have done. Keep your head down, do your job, stay invisible. But something about her expression pulled at something deep inside my chest, some thread of recognition that connected to my own years of feeling lost and alone in a world that did not seem to want me. Before I knew what I was doing, I was walking toward her with my tray of champagne glasses. "Would you like a drink?" I asked, my voice coming out slightly rougher than I intended. She turned to look at me, and I saw that her eyes were bright with unshed tears. For a moment, she just stared at me, as if surprised that anyone had noticed her standing there. Then she smiled, a small, sad smile that did not quite reach her eyes, and reached for a glass. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was soft, cultured, exactly what you would expect from a woman in a gown like that at an event like this. "That is very kind of you." I should have walked away then. I should have nodded and moved on to the next guest, maintained my invisibility, stayed in my lane. Instead, I heard myself say, "Are you all right?" Her hand froze halfway to her mouth, the champagne glass trembling slightly in her grip. "I am sorry? You just look like maybe you are having a difficult evening." I gestured vaguely at the room around us. "All of this can be overwhelming, I imagine." She laughed then, a real laugh that transformed her face from merely beautiful to something almost luminous. "That is quite possibly the most honest thing anyone has said to me all night." She took a sip of her champagne and studied me with new interest. "What is your name?" "Marcus," I said. "Marcus Thompson." "Well, Marcus Thompson, I am Victoria Hartwell. And you are absolutely right. I am having a terrible evening." Victoria Hartwell, the Victoria Hartwell, daughter of Richard Hartwell, the man whose name was on the building where I worked, the hotel where we stood, the foundation hosting this very gala. I felt my stomach drop. Of course, the one person I decided to talk to would be the most important woman in the room. "I am so sorry," I stammered, my professional composure crumbling. "I did not mean to intrude, Miss Hartwell. I will just—" "Stay," she said, and there was something in her voice that was almost pleading. "Please, you are the first person tonight who has talked to me like I am an actual human being and not just a name on a foundation letterhead." I should have walked away. Every instinct I had developed over years of staying invisible, staying safe, staying out of the way of people with power, was screaming at me to make my excuses and disappear back into the crowd. But I stayed. God help me, I stayed. For the next 20 minutes, we talked. Or rather, she talked and I listened, which is something I have always been good at. She told me about the pressure of being the Hartwell heir, about the expectations that had been placed on her shoulders since birth, about the engagement her father had arranged to the son of his business partner, a man she had met exactly 3 times and did not particularly like. She told me about her dreams of studying art history in Florence, dreams she had abandoned to take her place in the family business. She told me about feeling like a character in someone else's story, reading lines from a script she never agreed to follow. I listened to all of it, and somewhere in the listening, I forgot about the tray in my hands. I forgot about the champagne glasses. I forgot about everything except this woman who was pouring out her heart to a complete stranger because no one in her gilded world would bother to ask if she was okay. And then it happened. One of the other servers bumped into me from behind, hard enough to send me stumbling forward. The tray tilted, the champagne glasses slid, and before I could do anything to stop it, an entire glass of red wine that must have been on my tray without me noticing splashed directly down the front of Victoria Hartwell's pristine white gown. The room went silent. I swear to you, even the orchestra stopped playing for a moment, though that might just be how I remember it. Victoria stood there, her beautiful gown now stained with a spreading crimson blotch that looked almost like blood, her eyes wide with shock. And I stood there, empty tray in my hands, feeling like the floor should open up and swallow me whole. "Oh my God," I breathed. "I am so sorry. I am so incredibly sorry. I did not mean—" "Marcus," Victoria said, and her voice was strange, pitched somewhere between tears and laughter. "Marcus, look at me." I forced myself to meet her eyes, expecting to see anger, disgust, the cold dismissal I had seen on so many wealthy faces over the years. Instead, I saw something I did not expect at all. I saw relief. She started laughing, not the polite titter of a socialite who had been publicly embarrassed, but a real, genuine, full-throated laugh that made her whole body shake. She laughed until tears streamed down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup, and she did not seem to care at all. "This gown," she gasped between laughs, "cost $8,000. My father picked it out. He said it would make me look like a proper Hartwell bride. And now look at it." I did not know what to say. I did not know what to do. I just stood there, frozen, while the other guests began to murmur and point, while cameras flashed from the society reporters stationed around the room, while Victoria Hartwell laughed like she had just been told the funniest joke in the world. And then her father appeared. Richard Hartwell was exactly what you would expect from a man whose name was on half the buildings in Chicago. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with eyes like chips of blue ice that could probably freeze a man's blood from across the room. He pushed through the crowd of gawkers and stopped in front of his daughter, taking in the ruined gown, the laughing tears, the black janitor standing next to her with an empty tray and a look of pure horror on his face. "Victoria," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "what happened here?" Victoria's laughter died, but the smile stayed on her face, defiant and bright. "There was an accident, Father. Nothing serious." "Nothing serious?" He gestured at her gown. "You are covered in wine in front of every important person in the city, in front of William and his family." His eyes finally landed on me, and I felt myself shrink under the weight of his gaze. "Who is this?" "This is Marcus," Victoria said. And there was something in her voice now, something stubborn and reckless that I would come to know very well over the following months. "He was keeping me company while I waited for my fiancé to remember I existed." Richard Hartwell's expression did not change, but I could feel the temperature around us drop several degrees. "You," he said, addressing me directly for the first time, "what is your job here tonight?" I straightened my spine, forcing myself not to look away from his eyes. "I work building maintenance, sir. I was filling in for the service staff tonight." "Building maintenance." His lip curled slightly. "You are a janitor." "Yes, sir." "And you thought it would be appropriate to spend 20 minutes chatting with my daughter at a charity gala, spilling wine on her in the process." I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Victoria beat me to it. He did not spill the wine on purpose, Father, and the conversation was my idea. Marcus was being kind to me when no one else could be bothered. Richard Hartwell looked at his daughter with an expression I could not quite read. It might have been anger, it might have been something else entirely. Then he turned back to me, and his eyes were cold enough to freeze the champagne in my non-existent glass. "You are fired," he said. "Collect your things and leave the premises immediately. Security will escort you out." "Father!" Victoria's voice was sharp with protest. "This is not up for discussion, Victoria." He gripped her arm and began steering her away from me. "Come, we need to get you cleaned up before the speeches." I watched them go, the crowd parting before them like the Red Sea before Moses. Victoria looked back at me once, her face a mixture of apology and something that might have been admiration, and then they disappeared into a private corridor, and I was alone. Well, not quite alone. A security guard appeared at my elbow almost immediately, his hand on my arm in a grip that was just firm enough to communicate that resistance would not be tolerated. "This way, sir," he said, and his voice held none of the contempt that Hartwell's had, just tired professionalism. I let him lead me through the service corridors I knew so well, past the kitchen where I could hear the clatter of dishes being prepared, through the loading dock where the delivery trucks came and went. He handed me a cardboard box and waited while I collected my things from my locker, a worn paperback novel, a picture of my mother in a cheap frame, a change of clothes. The sum total of 8 years at this job. "I am sorry about this," the guard said as he walked me to the employee exit. "I have seen you around. You are a good worker." "Thank you," I said, because what else was there to say? I stepped out into the January cold, the cardboard box tucked under my arm, and I did not look back at the Hartwell building. I had learned a long time ago that looking back only made moving forward harder. I walked to the bus stop and waited in the freezing wind, thinking about how quickly everything could change. One spilled drink, one moment of reaching out to another human being, one single second of forgetting my place in the world. And just like that, everything I had built over the past 8 years was gone. The bus came and I climbed on, and I rode through the dark streets of Chicago toward my empty apartment on the South Side. I thought about Victoria Hartwell's laugh, about the way her eyes had looked when she told me about her abandoned dreams. I thought about her father's cold dismissal, about the way he had looked at me like I was something unpleasant he had found on the bottom of his shoe. I thought about my mother, who had worked herself to death in the laundry of a hospital that probably threw a gala just like this one every year, celebrating generosity while paying their workers barely enough to survive. By the time I got home, I was angry, not at Victoria, never at Victoria, but at the world that had created situations like this, a world where a janitor could be fired for showing kindness to a lonely woman, a world where your worth was measured by the size of your bank account and the prestige of your name, a world where people like me were expected to stay invisible, to serve without question, to accept whatever scraps the wealthy chose to throw our way and be grateful for them. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and I made a decision. I was done being invisible. I was done accepting that my place in this world was in the shadows, cleaning up after people who would not even acknowledge my existence. I did not know how, but I was going to make something of myself. I was going to prove that Marcus Thompson was worth more than a dismissive glance and a cardboard box. The next morning, I started looking for a new job. It was not easy. When you have a criminal record, even a wrongful conviction that was eventually overturned, doors have a way of closing before you can even knock. I applied to dozens of positions over the following weeks, and I was rejected from every single one. The economy was in a downturn, they said. They had already filled the position, they said. They would keep my resume on file, they said. All of it was just polite code for, "We do not hire people like you." My savings dwindled. My rent came due.
I sold my car to make the payment, then took on odd jobs wherever I could find them. I shoveled snow from driveways. I helped people move furniture. I stood on street corners handing out flyers for businesses that paid me in cash. It was humiliating, back-breaking work, and there were nights when I lay in my bed and stared at the ceiling and wondered if the universe was trying to tell me something. Maybe I was meant to be invisible. Maybe reaching for more had been a mistake. And then, exactly 6 weeks after the gala, I got a phone call from a number I did not recognize. "Is this Marcus Thompson?" the voice on the other end asked. It was a woman's voice, crisp and professional. "Yes," I said, wondering if this was a bill collector or a telemarketer or just another rejection dressed up in polite language. "My name is Eleanor Price. I am the personal assistant to Victoria Hartwell. Miss Hartwell would like to meet with you at your earliest convenience. Would tomorrow morning work for you?" I nearly dropped the phone. Victoria Hartwell? She wants to meet with me? "Yes, Mr. Thompson, she has been trying to locate you for several weeks, but the Hartwell Corporation's records of your employment had been purged. It took some time to track you down. Is 10 o'clock tomorrow acceptable?" I looked around my apartment at the peeling wallpaper and the secondhand furniture and the notice from my landlord that was sitting on the kitchen counter, politely informing me that I had 5 days to pay my rent or face eviction. "Tomorrow at 10 would be fine," I said. "Excellent. I will text you the address. Please be punctual. Miss Hartwell has a very busy schedule."
I took 2 buses to get there, wearing my only dress shirt, which I had ironed 3 times to make sure every wrinkle was gone. The brownstone was beautiful in that understated way that old money always is. Red brick, white trim, window boxes that probably bloomed with flowers in the spring. I stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, just looking at it, trying to understand why Victoria Hartwell would want to see me in a place like this. The door opened before I could knock. Eleanor Price, I presumed, was a woman in her 50s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that assessed me in a single glance. "Mr. Thompson, you are early. Good. Miss Hartwell appreciates punctuality. Please come in." The inside of the brownstone was even more beautiful than the outside. High ceilings, hardwood floors, art on the walls that I was pretty sure belonged in a museum. Eleanor led me through a foyer and a living room and into a sun-drenched conservatory at the back of the house, where Victoria Hartwell was sitting at a small table with a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked different than she had at the gala. No elaborate gown, no styled hair, no carefully applied makeup. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair falling loose around her shoulders, her face clean and bare. She looked younger this way, more real, more like the woman who had laughed when I spilled wine on her dress. "Marcus," she said, and she smiled, and something in my chest loosened. "I am so glad you came. Please, sit down. Would you like some coffee?" I sat across from her, feeling out of place among all this wealth and beauty, and accepted the cup that Eleanor poured for me. "Thank you," I said, "but I have to admit I am very confused about why I'm here." Victoria set down her own cup and looked at me with those bright, intelligent eyes. "I wanted to apologize to you, Marcus. What my father did at the gala was unconscionable. You were fired because you showed me kindness, and that has been weighing on me ever since." "You do not need to apologize for your father," I said. "You did not do anything wrong." "Maybe not, but I also did not do anything right. I stood there and let him fire you without putting up a real fight. I should have done more." "There was nothing you could have done. Men like Richard Hartwell do not listen to anyone, not even their own daughters." Victoria laughed, that same bright laugh I remembered from the gala. "You are right about that. My father is not a man who changes his mind easily, but that does not mean there is nothing I can do now." She reached into a folder that was sitting on the table and pulled out a piece of paper, which she slid across to me. I looked down at it and felt my heart stop. It was a check, made out to Marcus Thompson, for $50,000.
"I cannot accept this," I said immediately, pushing the check back toward her. "I did not help you that night for money. I helped you because you looked like you needed someone to talk to." "I know that," Victoria said, and she pushed the check back toward me. "That is exactly why I want you to have it. Do you have any idea how rare that is, Marcus? How rare it is to find someone in my world who does something kind without expecting anything in return? But $50,000? Consider it back pay. Consider it compensation for wrongful termination. Consider it whatever you need to consider it to make yourself feel better about accepting it. But please, Marcus, take it. Let me do this one thing to make up for what my family did to you." I looked at the check, at all those zeros, at the solution to every problem I had been drowning in for the past 6 weeks. The rent, the bills, the eviction notice, all of it could be fixed with this single piece of paper. But something in me rebelled against the idea of taking money from this woman, no matter how freely it was offered. "I will take it," I said slowly, "on one condition." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "What condition?" "I do not want charity. I want to earn this money. If you have any work that needs doing, any job I can do to justify this payment, then I will take it. But I will not just take a handout. I have spent my whole life working for everything I have. I am not going to stop now." Victoria studied me for a long moment, and I could see her thinking, calculating, considering. Then she smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "Actually," she said, "there is something. I recently acquired this building as part of my trust fund. I've been wanting to convert it into apartments for people transitioning out of homelessness, a place where they can get back on their feet with dignity. But I need someone to oversee the renovation, someone who understands what it's like to struggle, who will treat the future residents with respect. Would you be interested in something like that?" I stared at her. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership. I have the money and the vision. You have the work ethic and the perspective I need. Together, we could actually help people instead of just throwing money at problems and hoping they go away." It was insane.
A month ago, I had been a janitor scraping by on minimum wage. Now, a billionaire heiress was offering me a partnership in a charitable enterprise. Things like this did not happen to people like me. But then again, things like spilling wine on Victoria Hartwell and getting laughed at instead of screamed at did not happen either. Maybe the universe was trying to tell me something after all. "Okay," I said. "I am in." Victoria's smile widened. "Good, because I have to warn you, Marcus, this is not going to be easy. My father is going to fight this every step of the way. He does not approve of my charitable work, and he certainly does not approve of me associating with, and I apologize for using his words, the help. I have been underestimated my whole life," I said. "I am used to people thinking I am not good enough. But you know what I have learned? The people who underestimate you are always the most surprised when you prove them wrong." Victoria laughed again, that bright, beautiful sound that had started all of this. "I think you and I are going to get along very well, Marcus Thompson." And that was how my new life began. Not with the spilled wine, but with a choice to reach out to someone who was hurting, a choice to accept help without losing my dignity, a choice to believe that I was worth more than the world had been telling me my whole life. The next few months were the hardest and the best of my life. Victoria and I worked together every day on the brownstone project, which we decided to call the Gateway House. She handled the paperwork and the permits and the endless meetings with city officials, while I managed the actual renovation, hiring contractors and overseeing the work, and making sure everything was done right. We made a good team, filling in each other's gaps, challenging each other's assumptions, building something real out of nothing but a shared vision. But it was not all smooth sailing. Victoria's father, as she had warned, fought us at every turn. He tried to block our permits. He tried to pressure our contractors into quitting. He even tried to have me arrested on trumped-up charges, claiming that I had stolen from the Hartwell Corporation during my time as a janitor. That one almost worked. I spent 2 nights in jail before Victoria's lawyers got the charges dismissed and threatened Richard Hartwell with a very public countersuit for harassment. After that, he backed off a little. Not because he had changed his mind about me or about the project, but because he realized that fighting his daughter in public would damage the Hartwell reputation more than tolerating my existence ever could. Rich people care about their reputations more than almost anything else. I learned that lesson well during those months. But the real challenge was not Richard Hartwell. The real challenge was the thing growing between Victoria and me, the connection that had sparked at the gala and only intensified as we spent more time together. I tried to ignore it at first. She was a billionaire heiress, engaged to be married, so far out of my league that we were not even playing the same sport. I was a janitor, an ex-convict, a nobody from the South Side with nothing to offer her but hard work and honest conversation. But Victoria had a way of seeing past all of that. She saw me, the real me, in a way that no one else ever had. And slowly, reluctantly, I began to let myself see her too. Not the Hartwell heiress, not the charity princess, but Victoria, a woman who loved old movies and spicy food and books about ancient civilizations. A woman who snorted when she laughed really hard and cried at commercials about puppies and stayed up until 3 in the morning working on spreadsheets for the Gateway House because she could not stand the thought of a single detail being overlooked. I fell in love with her. Of course I did. How could I not? The problem was her engagement. William Thornton III, son of Richard Hartwell's business partner, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune, and the kind of man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory specifically designed to produce wealthy white men. He was handsome in that generic catalog model way, with perfectly styled hair and perfectly white teeth, and perfectly boring opinions about everything. Victoria did not love him. She had told me as much during our very first conversation at the gala, but she was going to marry him anyway, because that was what her father expected, because that was what the Hartwell family needed, because that was the script she had been given, and she did not know how to write her own. It was breaking my heart to watch her go through the motions of wedding planning, choosing flowers she did not care about, trying on dresses she did not want, smiling for engagement photos that were going to hang on a wall in a house she did not want to live in. I wanted to shake her, to tell her that she deserved better, that she deserved a life of her own choosing. But who was I to tell Victoria Hartwell how to live her life? I was just a janitor who got lucky. And then, 6 months after the gala, everything changed again. We were at the Gateway House, doing a final walkthrough before our first residents moved in. It was a Friday evening, and the building looked beautiful. Every apartment was freshly painted, furnished with donated furniture that had been carefully selected to be comfortable and practical, stocked with basic necessities that would help people get started on their new lives. Looking at what we had built together, I felt a pride I had never experienced before. "We did it," Victoria said, standing in the lobby with tears in her eyes. "We actually did it, Marcus." "We did," I agreed, "but this is just the beginning. Now comes the hard part, making sure these people actually get the support they need to stay off the streets for good." Victoria nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I know, and we will, together." There was something in the way she said that word, together, that made me look at her more closely. She was watching me with an expression I had never seen before, something vulnerable and hopeful and terrified all at once. "Victoria," I said, my heart beginning to beat faster, "what is it?" "I broke off the engagement," she said. "This morning. I called William and told him I could not go through with it." I stared at her, not sure I had heard correctly. "You what?" "I cannot marry him, Marcus. I cannot spend the rest of my life pretending to be someone I am not, living a life I did not choose. These past 6 months, working with you on this project, I have felt more alive than I have felt in years. I have felt like myself for the first time since I was a child, and I realized that I cannot give that up. I cannot go back to being the perfect Hartwell daughter who does everything she is told and never asks for anything for herself."
What did William say? He was furious. My father is going to be even worse when he finds out. She took a shaky breath. But I do not care anymore. I am done living my life to make other people happy. I should have said something sensible, something about how big a decision this was, how she needed to think about it carefully, how I was probably not the right person to be having this conversation with. Instead, I said the only thing I could think of. I am in love with you. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and terrifying and true. I watched Victoria's face cycle through shock, disbelief, and finally, gloriously, joy. I love you too, she said. I have been in love with you since you spilled wine on my dress and then stood there looking like you wanted the ground to swallow you whole. I have been in love with you since you listened to me complain about my life and actually cared about what I was saying. I have been in love with you since you refused to take my money without earning it, since you worked beside me day after day building this place, since you showed me what it looks like to be a person of integrity in a world full of people who have none. Victoria, she crossed the distance between us in 3 quick steps and kissed me. It was not a gentle kiss, not a tentative first kiss between 2 people who did not know each other well. It was a kiss that held months of suppressed longing, of stolen glances, of conversations that danced around the truth neither of us could say out loud. It was the kind of kiss that changes everything. When we finally pulled apart, both of us breathing hard, she pressed her forehead against mine and laughed. My father is going to kill us both, she said. Probably, I agreed, but I have been underestimated my whole life, remember? The people who underestimate you are always the most surprised when you prove them wrong. And we will, she said. We will prove all of them wrong. I wish I could tell you that it was easy after that. I wish I could tell you that love conquered all, that Victoria's father accepted our relationship, that we lived happily ever after without any more complications. But real life is not a fairy tale, and the path from that kiss to where I am now was paved with more obstacles than I could have imagined. Richard Hartwell, as Victoria predicted, was furious when he found out about the broken engagement, and even more furious when he discovered that his daughter was in a relationship with me. He tried everything he could think of to separate us. He cut off Victoria's access to her trust fund. He threatened to disinherit her entirely. He hired private investigators to dig up dirt on my past. And when he found out about my wrongful conviction, he tried to use it to convince Victoria that I was a criminal who was only using her for her money. None of it worked. Victoria stood by me through all of it, defending me to her father, defending our relationship to the society gossips who whispered about the Hartwell heiress and her janitor boyfriend, defending our vision for the Gateway House when the board of the Hartwell Foundation tried to shut it down. She was fiercer than I ever could have imagined, this woman who had seemed so lost and fragile that night at the gala. Turns out, she had just been waiting for something worth fighting for. The private investigators did dig up some uncomfortable truths about my past, things I had not told Victoria because I was ashamed, because I was afraid she would see me differently if she knew.
They found out about my 2 years in prison, about the robbery I had been convicted of before DNA evidence proved I was innocent. They found out about the settlement I had received from the state, money I had used to pay off my mother's medical bills, and then donated the rest to a legal aid organization that helped other wrongfully convicted people. They found out about the anger I had carried for years, the bitterness toward a system that had stolen 2 years of my life and branded me with a stigma I could never fully escape. Victoria already knew about the wrongful conviction. I had told her early on, wanting her to have all the facts before she decided to trust me. But she did not know about the rest of it, about the nightmares I still had sometimes, about the way I still flinched when I saw police officers, about the therapy I had been going to for years to deal with the trauma of what I had experienced. When I told her all of it, sitting in her living room at 2 a.m. because I could not keep secrets from her anymore, she listened without interrupting. Then she took my hand and said something I will never forget. Marcus, the worst thing that ever happened to you was also the thing that made you who you are. You could have come out of that experience bitter and broken. Instead, you came out determined to build a better life, to help other people,
to prove that you were worth more than what the world tried to make you believe. That is not something to be ashamed of. That is something to be proud of. I cried that night, really cried, for the first time since my mother's funeral. I cried for the years I had lost, for the man I might have become if the world had been kinder, for the fear and shame I had carried for so long. And Victoria held me through all of it, not judging, not fixing, just being there. That was when I knew, really knew, that she was the person I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. The Gateway House opened on schedule, despite all of Richard Hartwell's efforts to stop it. Our first residents moved in on a sunny April morning, 10 individuals who had been living on the streets of Chicago for anywhere from 6 months to 15 years. Watching them walk through the doors of the building Victoria and I had created together, seeing the hope and disbelief on their faces as they realized they had a real home for the first time in years, was the proudest moment of my life. We expanded the program over the following year. Victoria used her connections to secure additional funding from other wealthy donors who were actually interested in making a difference rather than just writing checks for tax benefits. I developed a job training program to help our residents build skills that would allow them to support themselves. We hired counselors and case managers and job coaches, building a support system that would give people a real chance at permanent stability. Word spread. Other cities began reaching out, wanting to learn from our model. Victoria gave speeches at conferences and fundraising dinners, sharing our story with audiences who were often skeptical that a project like this could actually work. And slowly, painfully, the evidence began to prove that it could. Our first cohort of residents had a 90% success rate at maintaining stable housing after they graduated from the program. Our job training graduates had a 75% employment rate within 6 months. We were actually changing lives, one person at a time. And through it all, Victoria and I grew closer. We moved in together after a year of dating, into a modest apartment that we chose together specifically because it was far away from the Hartwell family properties. We adopted a dog, a scrappy rescue mutt that Victoria fell in love with at a shelter event we attended together. We built a life that was entirely our own, far removed from the gilded cage she had grown up in. I proposed on the 1-year anniversary of the Gateway House opening. Nothing fancy, just a quiet dinner at our favorite restaurant, followed by a walk along the lakefront, where I got down on one knee with a ring that I had saved up for 6 months to buy. Victoria said yes before I even finished asking the question, laughing and crying at the same time. And then we stood there on the shore of Lake Michigan and held each other while the sun set behind the Chicago skyline. Richard Hartwell did not attend our wedding. Neither did most of Victoria's extended family, who had sided with her father in the rift that our relationship had caused. But it did not matter. Our wedding was small and intimate, held in the backyard of the Lincoln Park brownstone that had started it all, surrounded by the people who actually loved and supported us. My friends from my old neighborhood, Victoria's college roommate who had remained loyal even when everyone else abandoned her, the first residents of the Gateway House who had become like family to us over the year we had worked together, Eleanor Price, who turned out to be much warmer than her stern exterior suggested, cried through the entire ceremony. My best man was a guy named James, one of our Gateway House residents who had turned his life around so completely that he was now working as a job coach in our program. When I asked him to stand beside me on the most important day of my life, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said something I will never forget. "Marcus," he said, "you changed my life. You looked at me when I was at my lowest point and you saw something worth saving. That is the rarest gift anyone can give another person. I am honored to stand beside you." I think about James a lot when people ask me how the Gateway House got started. They want to hear about business plans and funding models and scalable strategies, and I give them all of that because that is what they need to know. But the real answer is simpler and more complicated at the same time. The Gateway House got started because one night at a charity gala, I decided to be visible. I decided to reach out to another human being who was hurting, even though every instinct I had told me to stay invisible and safe. I decided that kindness was worth the risk, even when the risk meant losing everything. And sometimes, when I am feeling philosophical, I think about the wine stain on Victoria's dress, that spreading crimson blotch that looked like blood, that marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. It was an accident, pure and simple, but accidents have a way of revealing things that we keep hidden, breaking down walls that we have spent years building, exposing the truth of who we really are when the masks we wear are suddenly stripped away. Victoria could have reacted to that spilled wine in 1,000 different ways. She could have screamed at me. She could have demanded that I be fired immediately before her father even got involved. She could have treated me the way everyone else in her world had been treating her, as a function to be used and discarded rather than a person to be seen and valued. Instead, she laughed. She laughed because the ruined dress represented something to her, something about the life she did not want and the freedom she was desperate to find. And in that laugh, I saw who she really was beneath all the Hartwell expectations and obligations. I like to think she saw something similar in me that night, a man who cared enough to ask if she was okay, a man who listened to her dreams without judgment or agenda, a man who was willing to reach across the vast chasm that separated their worlds and offer a simple moment of human connection. That is what I try to teach the people who come through our program now. Connection is everything. The loneliness of homelessness is often worse than the physical hardship of not having a roof over your head. What breaks people is not the cold or the hunger, though those things are terrible enough. What breaks people is the feeling that no one sees them, that they have become invisible, that the world has decided they do not matter anymore. We matter, all of us, regardless of where we sleep at night or what is in our bank accounts or what mistakes we have made in our past. We matter because we are human beings, and human beings were not designed to be invisible. We were designed to connect, to care, to reach out to each other across all the barriers that society puts between us. 5 years after that charity gala, Victoria and I were invited to speak at the Hartwell Foundation's annual event. Richard Hartwell had died the previous year, a massive heart attack that struck him down in the middle of a board meeting. Victoria had inherited his seat on the foundation board, along with a substantial portion of his estate that she was in the process of redirecting toward causes he would have hated. The invitation to speak was her first official act as a board member. She wanted to show the foundation's donors what real charity looked like, not check writing from a distance, but actual engagement with the people you were trying to help. And she wanted them to hear our story, the story of how one spilled drink had led to everything that followed. I was nervous as we got ready that night, more nervous than I had been in years. I was going to stand in the same ballroom where I had been humiliated and fired, wearing a tuxedo that actually fit me this time, and I was going to tell hundreds of the wealthiest people in Chicago that they were doing charity wrong. Victoria found me in the bathroom of our apartment, trying to get my bow tie straight for the 5th time. My hands were shaking too badly to make it work. "Let me," she said, gently pushing my hands away and taking over the task. "You know, the last time we were in that ballroom, I was wearing a white dress that cost more than most people's rent." "I remember," I said. "I ruined it." "You freed me," she corrected. "There is a difference." I looked at her in the mirror, this woman who had become my wife, my partner, my best friend. She was wearing a dark blue gown tonight, simple and elegant, nothing like the ostentatious white confection her father had forced her into 5 years ago. Her hair was down around her shoulders the way she preferred it, and she was not wearing any jewelry except her wedding ring and a small pendant that belonged to my mother.
"Are you sure about this?" I asked. "Once we give this speech, there is no going back. The whole city is going to know our story." "Marcus," she said, turning me to face her, "our story is the whole point. People need to see that change is possible. They need to see that you can break out of the life you were born into and create something new. They need to see that love can grow in the most unexpected places if you are brave enough to let it." I kissed her then, the same kind of kiss she had given me in the lobby of the Gateway House all those years ago. A kiss that held everything, all the fear and hope and love that we had built together. "Okay," I said when we finally pulled apart. "Let's go change some minds." The ballroom looked exactly the same as it had 5 years ago. The same crystal chandeliers, the same polished marble floors, the same round tables with their elaborate centerpieces, the same wealthy guests in their expensive clothes, drinking champagne and talking about things that most people in the city could never afford. I saw a few faces I recognized from that night, people who had been there when I spilled wine on Victoria's dress. They looked at me with confusion, trying to place where they knew me from, not quite able to reconcile the janitor they remembered with the man standing at the podium beside Victoria Hartwell. Victoria spoke first, telling her side of the story. The loneliness she had felt that night, the desperation to connect with someone who saw her as a person rather than a name. The way one simple question, "Are you all right?" had cracked open something inside her that she had been keeping locked away for years. The wine stain that became a symbol of everything she wanted to leave behind. Then it was my turn. I looked out at the sea of wealthy faces, at the diamonds and tuxedos and carefully cultivated expressions of polite interest, and I thought about my mother. I thought about her hands, cracked and bleeding from industrial chemicals. I thought about her back, bent from years of labor. I thought about her dying alone in a break room, still wearing her uniform, still giving everything she had to a world that barely acknowledged her existence. 5 years ago, I said into the microphone, I stood in this room as a janitor, filling in for the service staff. I was invisible. I was nobody. I was exactly what the world expected me to be, a function, a pair of hands, a person who existed only to serve and then disappear. I looked at Victoria, standing beside me, and I felt the weight of everything we had built together pressing against my heart. Tonight, I continued, I am standing here as the co-director of the Gateway House, an organization that has helped over 500 people transition from homelessness to stable housing. I am standing here as the husband of the woman who saw me when no one else did. I am standing here as proof that one moment of human connection can change everything. I told them our story, all of it. The spilled wine, the laughter, the firing, the phone call 6 weeks later, the partnership that became friendship, that became love, the obstacles we faced and how we overcame them, the lives we had changed and the lives that had changed us. But here's the thing I really want you to understand, I said as I approached the end of my speech. Charity is not about writing checks. It is not about attending galas and posing for photos. It is not about feeling good about yourself for doing the bare minimum to acknowledge that other people exist. Real charity is about seeing people. It is about recognizing that every person you encounter, whether they are serving you champagne or sleeping under a bridge, has a story and a struggle and a fundamental human dignity that deserves to be honored. I paused, looking out at the audience. Some of them looked uncomfortable. Some of them looked intrigued. Some of them looked like they were already thinking about how soon they could leave and get back to their comfortable lives. The woman who spilled wine on my wife's dress 5 years ago, I said, she was just doing her job. I never found out who she was or what happened to her. But I think about her sometimes. I wonder if she is okay. I wonder if anyone ever asks her if she is okay, or if she moves through her life as invisible as I was that night. Victoria took my hand and squeezed it, giving me the strength to say what I needed to say next. That is my challenge to all of you tonight, I said. See the invisible people. Ask them if they are okay. Listen to what they have to say. You might be surprised by what you discover. You might even discover something about yourself. The applause when we finished was polite rather than enthusiastic, which was about what I expected. These people did not come here to be challenged. They came to feel good about themselves, to see and be seen, to maintain the social connections that kept their world spinning smoothly on its axis. But a few of them approached us afterward with genuine interest, asking about the Gateway House, asking how they could get involved in ways that went beyond writing checks.
One of them was a woman about my age, dressed simply compared to the other guests, who introduced herself as a social worker with the city. I have been trying to get funding for a program like yours for years, she said. Would you be willing to meet with me next week to discuss a potential partnership? Another was a young man, barely out of college, who was the son of one of Richard Hartwell's old business partners. He told us that he had been feeling disconnected from the charitable work his family was involved in, that it had always felt performative and empty. "Your story made me want to do something real," he said. "Can I volunteer at the Gateway House?" These small victories, these moments of connection, were what made everything worth it. Not the standing ovations or the media coverage or the awards we would eventually win for our work. Just the simple knowledge that we had reached someone, that our story had made a difference in a way that rippled outward into the world. We left the gala around midnight, walking out through the same service corridors where I had been escorted by security 5 years ago. The building looked different to me now, not because it had changed, but because I had changed. I was no longer the invisible man pushing a mop through pristine hallways. I was someone who had found his voice, his purpose, his place in the world. Victoria and I walked to our car hand in hand, the January wind biting at our faces, just like it had that night 5 years ago. But this time, I was not alone. This time, I was not carrying a cardboard box full of the remnants of a life that had just been torn apart. This time, I was carrying something much heavier and much more precious. The knowledge that one moment of reaching out, one small act of human kindness, had started a chain reaction that was still rippling outward into the world. That is the real secret I have learned over these years. The universe is not indifferent to our choices. Every time we decide to be visible instead of invisible, to connect instead of withdraw, to care instead of look away, we are creating possibilities that did not exist before. We are opening doors that might lead to places we never imagined. We are proving that the barriers between us are not as solid as they seem, that love and kindness can cross boundaries that money and status never could. I do not know what would have happened if I had kept walking that night at the gala, if I had looked at Victoria Hartwell standing alone by the dance floor and decided that she was none of my business. Maybe she would have married William Thornton and lived out her life as the perfect Hartwell wife. Maybe I would have continued pushing my mop through hallways, invisible and safe and utterly unfulfilled. Maybe the Gateway House would never have existed, and those 500 people would still be on the streets. Or maybe the universe would have found another way to bring us together. Maybe fate is not a single thread, but a vast tapestry of possibilities, and any moment of genuine human connection can be the starting point of something beautiful. I choose to believe that. I choose to believe that every one of us has the power to change the world, one small act of kindness at a time. I choose to believe that the barriers between us are illusions, that underneath all the differences of wealth and status and background, we are all just human beings looking for connection, looking for meaning, looking for someone who will ask us if we are okay. That night at the charity gala, one spill changed everything, but the spill itself was just the catalyst. What really changed everything was the choice that came after, the choice to laugh instead of scream, the choice to listen instead of dismiss, the choice to see another human being as worthy of attention and care, even when all the rules of the world said otherwise. Make that choice. Make it every day with every person you encounter, regardless of whether they are serving you champagne or standing on a street corner with a cardboard sign. You never know which moment of connection might be the one that changes everything. Because here is the truth I have learned, the truth that Victoria and I have built our entire life around. Love shows up in unexpected places. It hides in spilled wine and ruined dresses, in late-night conversations with strangers, in the courage to break free from the lives we were given and create the lives we choose. And once you start looking for it, once you start believing that it is possible, you will find it everywhere you go. My name is Marcus Thompson. I used to be invisible. Now I spend my days helping other invisible people find their way back to being seen, and every single moment of it, from the highest highs to the lowest lows, started with one spilled glass of wine and one simple question: are you okay? If you are listening to this story and you are struggling, if you feel invisible and alone and like the world has given up on you, I want you to know something. You matter. You are worth seeing. You are worth saving.
And somewhere out there, maybe closer than you think, there is someone who is ready to reach out their hand and help you find your way back to the light.
All you have to do is let them. I want to tell you one more thing before I finish this story. It is something that happened just last month, something that reminded me of how far we have come and how much further we still have to go. I was at the Gateway House, doing my regular Tuesday rounds, checking in with our residents and making sure everyone had what they needed. The building has grown a lot since we first opened it. We have 3 locations now, serving over 200 people at any given time, with a waiting list that stretches into the thousands. Victoria and I joke sometimes that we created a monster, this organization that demands more of our time and energy than we ever imagined. But it is a good monster, a monster that feeds on hope and produces miracles. I was in the common room of our original location, the Lincoln Park brownstone, when one of our newer residents approached me. Her name was Maria, a woman in her early 40s who had been living in a tent under a highway overpass for the past 3 years. She had come to us 6 weeks earlier, scared and suspicious, and convinced that there had to be a catch somewhere. "Nobody gives you something for nothing," she had told me during our first meeting. "What is in it for you?" I had told her the truth. It makes me feel like the world can be better than it is. That is what is in it for me. She had looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language, like the concept of helping someone without expecting anything in return was so alien to her experience that she could not even begin to process it. But over the weeks that followed, I watched her begin to open up. She started attending our job training workshops, she made friends with some of the other residents, she adopted a cat from the shelter across the street, a scraggly orange thing that she named Sunshine because it reminded her of happier times. Slowly, painfully, she was rebuilding a life that she had thought was lost forever. That Tuesday afternoon, Maria walked up to me with tears streaming down her face, and for a moment I was terrified that something terrible had happened. But then she held out her phone and showed me a message on the screen. "I got the job," she said, her voice breaking. "The cleaning company. They hired me. I start on Monday." I felt my own eyes filling with tears as I looked at that message, at the simple words that represented so much more than just employment. It was a new beginning, a chance to prove to herself and to the world that she was worth something. A first step on a journey that I knew from personal experience would be long and difficult and absolutely worth it. "Congratulations, Maria," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "You earned this. You worked hard and you did not give up, and you earned this." She shook her head, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I did not do it alone. You and Victoria, this place, all the people here. You gave me a chance when nobody else would. You saw me when I was invisible." There was that word again, invisible, the word that had defined so much of my own life before Victoria saw me at that gala, the word that Maria had lived with for 3 years on the streets, watching people walk past her like she didn't exist, like she was a piece of garbage that someone had forgotten to pick up. "You were never invisible," I told her, "not to the people who matter. And now the whole world is going to see what you are capable of." She hugged me then, this woman who 6 weeks ago had been too afraid to make eye contact with anyone. She hugged me like I was the brother she had lost touch with years ago, like I was a lifeline she had finally found the courage to grab. And standing there in the common room of the Gateway House, holding this woman who had found her way back from the abyss, I thought about Victoria. I thought about the night we met, about the wine stain and the laughter, and the choice she made to see me as a person instead of a function. I thought about all the choices we had made since then, all the risks we had taken, all the times we had been told that what we were trying to do was impossible or naive or doomed to failure. We had proven them wrong, not through money or power or connections, but through something much more simple and much more profound, through the radical act of seeing people, really seeing them, and believing that they were worth saving. When I got home that night, I told Victoria about Maria. We were sitting on our back porch, watching the sun set over the city, our dog curled up at our feet like he had been doing every evening for the past 4 years. The apartment we had chosen specifically for its modesty had become a home, filled with memories and love and the comfortable silence of two people who knew each other completely. "That's why we do this," Victoria said after I finished telling her about Maria's job. "That's why all of it matters." "I know," I said. "I just wish we could help more people. The waiting list is so long, and there are so many others out there who will never even make it onto that list." Victoria reached over and took my hand, intertwining her fingers with mine the way she had done 10,000 times before.
"We cannot save everyone, Marcus, but we can save the ones we can. And every person we help is another ripple going out into the world, another proof that change is possible." She was right, of course. She usually was. That is the thing about this work that I have come to understand over the years. You cannot measure success by the numbers alone. Yes, we track our statistics. Yes, we can tell you that our job placement rate is 78% and our housing retention rate is 91% and our average time in the program is 14 months. But the real success is not in the numbers. The real success is in the moments like the one I had with Maria, when someone who had lost all hope finds it again. Real success is in the letters we receive from former residents, telling us about the lives they have built after leaving the Gateway House. The woman who is now a nurse at a hospital on the North Side. The man who started his own landscaping business and employs 3 other Gateway graduates. The teenager who was homeless at 17 and is now studying engineering at a state university. Real success is in the volunteers who come back week after week, year after year, because the work fills something in them that they could not find anywhere else. The retired teachers who lead our literacy classes, the business people who mentor our job seekers, the college students who spend their weekends painting apartments and moving furniture. Real success is in the donors who write checks not because they want their names on a building, but because they believe in what we are doing. The anonymous donor who sends us $10 every month with a note that says, "I used to be homeless too." The corporation that matches employee donations and sends volunteers for team building days. The family foundation that funded our expansion into the South Side because they wanted to help a community that was often overlooked. Real success is in the partnerships we have built with other organizations, the network of support that surrounds our residents and gives them multiple paths to stability, the mental health clinics that provide counseling, the job training programs that teach new skills, the legal aid organizations that help clear old records and resolve outstanding warrants, the church groups that provide meals and fellowship, the public agencies that have learned to work with us instead of against us. None of this existed 5 years ago. All of it started with one spilled glass of wine and one conversation at a charity gala. I do not tell you this to brag. I tell you this because I want you to understand that change is possible, that the world can be better than it is, that every single one of us has the power to make a difference, no matter how small or insignificant we might feel. You do not need to be rich to change the world. You do not need to be powerful or famous or connected. All you need is the willingness to see other people, to reach out across the barriers that separate us, to offer a moment of kindness to someone who needs it. That is the lesson Victoria taught me on that night at the gala. That is the lesson I try to pass on to everyone I meet. And that is the lesson I hope you will take with you as you finish listening to this story. See the invisible people. Ask them if they are okay. Listen to what they have to say. You never know which moment of connection might be the one that changes everything. Because here is the truth that I have learned, the truth that guides everything I do. We are all just one moment away from having our lives transformed. One encounter, one conversation, one spilled drink on a white designer gown. The universe is constantly offering us opportunities to become more than we are. All we have to do is be brave enough to take them. I took my opportunity 5 years ago, and it led me to a life I never could have imagined. It led me to love and purpose and a sense of meaning that fills every day with something worth fighting for.
It led me to Victoria and the Gateway House and the hundreds of lives we have helped change. Now it is your turn. Your opportunity is out there, waiting for you. It might come in the form of a stranger who needs help. It might come in the form of a dream you have been too afraid to pursue. It might come in the form of a relationship you have been too scared to build. Whatever form it takes, I hope you will be brave enough to reach for it. I hope you will remember that invisibility is a choice and that you can choose to be seen whenever you are ready. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let us meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I am looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There is so much more on my channel. Do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.